Hey guys, welcome back to Grown Folks Business with Stephanie and Keith. Today we're going to be discussing the theory of facing our problems head on. Are we truly practicing this theory? Because I'm sure we all agree with it to some extent that we all should do this, but are we doing this? So I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, which is Keith, and we're going to get his thoughts on it.
All right. Hello, Stephanie. Hello, everybody within the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you find this topic enlightening, and if you have any comments, please feel free to give them to us. We always read and take into account the comments. Facing our problems. I think just about universally people agree, adults agree, that that is an important thing to do. There's a word called procrastination. Procrastination has to do with, to some degree, not facing your problems. Putting off something you know you need to do, but you're putting it off. That's an indirect way of saying you're not facing a problem you have just to deal with it, get rid of it. Now, even though most people agree with it, there's got to be some reason why a lot of people don't practice it. I'm not in a position to say what the percentage is, but there are a lot of people, intelligent people, independent people, working people, educated people, and they do not practice this. They tend to procrastinate. They tend to put it to the side. They tend to deal with it later. Now, the reason for that could be multifold. But one of the reasons I think it's because, to some degree, people feel they always still have time. And that's something that nobody really knows what they have. You do not know how much time you still have to deal with a situation, to deal with a person, to deal with a circumstance. Because time is not promised.
Yeah, that's so true. So, just to paint a picture of what it looks like to actually be practicing this theory would be for me, is to exclude everything outside of myself, right? So whatever the situation is, whatever the circumstance is, the first thing I want to do is look at Stephanie. I want to see how I can grow from this situation. What can I learn from this situation? So just a quick example, say I'm having a little spat with a hubby, and a lot of times I find myself getting locked into trying to be right, trying to prove my point. Well, now I'm learning how to step back. It's not so much about proving my point as much as it is, why am I facing this thing? And so when I take a step back and I look at it from that perspective, I usually always see something about myself. Like I see whatever I'm unwilling to do. A lot of times I'm unwilling to be wrong. And because I'm unwilling to be wrong, it causes me to get a bit defensive where I'm just going back and forth with my old man when we really don't have to. And so that's one of the ways that I like to step back and look at myself to make sure that I am actually practicing this theory, that I am facing this problem head on. Because at the end of the day, I don't think none of these things come to take us down per se or to divide us. I think that it's just opportunities for us to see ourselves. They're reflections to some degree. What do you think, Keith?
Well, you said something that really, really caught my attention, and it's ringing in my mind right now. How many of us are willing to be wrong? And I think that requires a lot of fortitude. That requires a lot of internal strength of character to admit you're wrong. Not admit you're wrong about something objective, but admit you're wrong about something subjective, where there's really no right or wrong answer. But for a variety of reasons, you're willing to admit you are wrong, you could be wrong, you addressed it a wrong way, there could be a better way to do it or to address it. That requires a lot. But I think that that's a good thing if you're able to do that. And I think that should be an objective that a lot of us should aspire to unless we're already there. You might be in a position because of a bunch of positive qualities about you that you maybe have already arrived there. Where to a lot of people, that's a journey. And it's a journey some of them may not make.
Yeah, it's just true. And believe it or not, it's been a journey for me too. It's just that, with me wanting to do this work on self and wanting to better myself in any way that I can, it has just allowed this little voice to raise up in me. And I could remember a time where me and my husband were bickering over a phone, which way that we wanted to upgrade our phones. And I remember this little voice whispering to me like, is it about you being right or do you want to learn something? So I was like, what? Like, of course I want to learn something. I'm always open to learning something. And then something came to me was like, well, if I'm being consumed with trying to be right, then I'm not willing to learn anything. I've already said my piece. I've already took a hold to what I believe, which is I'm not wrong, right? And so that's what allowed me to be like, step back and say, you know what, in order for me to learn something, I have to be open to being wrong. I have to be willing to be wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or that I'm going to be wrong in this situation, but I have to be open to that, you know, and so that has helped me out a lot. You know, it helps me from being as defensive as I usually was. And it helps me to actually hear others versus me trying to come back with my comeback. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we're not really listening. Sometimes we don't really hear a person because we're too busy trying to plan our strategy in our mind. What I'm going to say next, how I'm going to come back and combat what you say. Well, if I'm thinking about how I'm going to combat what you say, then I'm not really taking in what you're saying. Which to me does not leave any room for me to learn anything or grasp anything new. What do you think?
I think you have that dead on. Is it better to be right versus a bunch of different things you could put? You put to learn something. Another person might put, is it better to be right versus having peace, having peace with that person? Because that, I think, depends to a great degree on who that person is to you. Very few people on earth are going to be closer to you than your spouse. So you're going to defer if you're trying to have peace, if you're trying to learn something, if you're trying to get along, if you want to have a really, really good relationship as opposed to being right, where you can count up your victories. To me, you count up your victories in the street. You have peace at home and you try to learn each other and from each other. So it's totally different depending on the circumstances and who that person is to you.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that to some degree you got to care about them or have some type of respect for them to some degree in order to want to step back to really fully hear what they're saying and grow from it. I'm trying to get to a place where I can do that with any and everybody because I'm learning how it soothes me. It gives me a peace of mind, you know, because it's like the fear is being wrong. Well, once I cancel out that by telling myself I'm open to being wrong, it's fine. This is part of the process. It's okay to be wrong. This is how I grow. This is how I learn. Then I don't have all of that anxiety or that fear in me, which allows me just to go with the flow, go through whatever emotions I need to go through to get to a solution or a conclusion or whatever it may be. But a lot of times I think that we have this negative connotation on being wrong. When did, making a mistake or having something twisted or being wrong become a bad thing? Like, it's a part of life. God always said no one's perfect. And it's like, are we really believing that? I mean, it comes out our mouth. Like, I'm not perfect. God is working on me. But do we really believe that? Because if we do believe that, then I don't think that we'll have this fear of being wrong, which causes us to be so defensive. What do you think about that?
Well, there's two ways I look at that. Being wrong versus being with another individual. In other words, are you wrong in a situation with a one-on-one with another individual? Or are you wrong with your general direction of life and how you're treating that? One, you could say all day long, I'm right, versus an individual and be wrong. But you can convince yourself you're right because that's only one individual. Life will not let you have that. Life will beat you down. Life will basically drain you of energy, will drain you of resources, will drain you of a bunch of positive stuff, will drain you of time to show you that's not the right way to do this.
Yeah.
And that you have to pay attention to. Otherwise, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of misery that you could avoid.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Life has a way of turning you upside down. So I definitely agree with that. But back to the main point is how important it is to really make sure that we're practicing this theory of facing ourselves, facing our problems head on. And I think that one of the most definite ways that we could say we're doing that is to always just take it back to you. Always ask yourself, why is this, why are you having this experience? Because I don't want to use the words happening to you, because again, I don't believe nothing happens to us. I believe it happens for us. So I find it easier just to ask myself, why am I having this experience? Why is it a need for me to even experience this thing that I'm experiencing right now? And a lot of times that'll take me back, like I said, to whereas it's not about me being right, or it's not about the other person being wrong. It's just more or less, what can we get from this? And I just found that a lot of times when I start there, when that is my starting point, I find that we get a lot further. We'll come up with the solution. You'll get the whys, the hows to how you got there. And again, to your point about life, yeah, life has its way of showing you over and over where you're wrong at. But again, if we still have this thing in our mind where we study manipulating ourselves into believing that we're right, it's still a blind spot, I think. What do you think?
You are absolutely right. That's why some people live their whole lives miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Because they refuse. Because the one thing they know they have, and this could be something that can be extremely, extremely negative, is they have free will. They have free will to do things the way they want. There's an expression people used to use, I'm grown. I do what I want. And you are absolutely correct. But what they leave out of that statement that really should be part of it, and I'm willing to suffer every consequence because of this, and they don't want to say that, because that's something they want to kind of turn a blind eye to. Mm-hmm. Even though they know that is part of that statement. Life will show them that's part of that statement, but sometimes that will just make them dig in more and more, even if it costs them friends, even if it costs them resources, even if it costs them the ability to advance, whether it's in life, whether it's with a job, whether it's with a business, because their need to be able to say, at least to themselves, that I'm right and they're not. I can do it this way no matter what they say, means more to them than anything. And that is a serious flaw that too many people have, and they don't want to change it. They're not willing to change it. They'll suffer. And sometimes they'll suffer for a lifetime.
Wow, yeah, that's so true. Wow, that was a lot you just said, and it's so true. But you know, that kind of happened to me. Whereas, you know, you have this need to be right, because you have this what I like to call this emptiness inside that you're trying to fill. You know, a lot of times that need to be right stems from something more within us. And so for me, mine stems from me feeling like I wasn't enough. And because I felt like I wasn't enough, it caused me to overcompensate. And, you know, when it's time to commerce back and forth with people, it's like I felt this need to be right. I felt this need to be seen. But at the end of the day, it just left me feeling like no one understood me, that I was all alone, that sometimes I'll be in a house full of people, but I still feel like I'm all alone because nobody understands me. But I didn't realize it was me that was doing that, because I was not open to something other than what I thought and how I felt. It caused me to isolate myself. Okay. And I think that that's what happened to a lot of us. And it's easier for us to say there's something wrong with someone else versus looking at what could possibly be wrong with ourselves. And as you stated early on, that is not an easy transition. And I don't know if it's like a complete transition. I think that it's something we will continue to work on for as long as we're here. I don't think it's an end game when it comes to these things. I think it's a constant practice. And I think the minute you stop practicing it, you can lose it. What they say, you lose what you don't use. So that's why I want to make it our business to make sure that we're using it. And a lot of us think that we're open. You'll have a lot of people that say, oh, I'm very open. But if you're not open to another way outside of what you think or other feelings outside of how you feel, then are you really open? That's the question. What's your thoughts on that?
Very true again. But if, going back to what you just said, if you felt a certain type of way, but you felt that way was not right, then that was almost like you're feeling a need to correct. You just need to find the proper way to do that, the proper vehicle to help you do that, which means given some time, you're on the road to some positive change because you're not procrastinating and you do see there's something wrong here and I need to be able to find it within myself, or I need to use some outside source to help me find it within myself to make that change for the better. But that means you start off with feeling something's not right.
Go ahead.
No, and then you made another statement, and I don't know if it kind of fit with what you were saying about the need to change if you feel something's not right, but it's just something that I've heard numerous times out of films, and sometimes I take lines out of certain movies, even though people who know me know I don't watch many movies. So some of the ones I watch, I tend to watch over and over and get things out of these movies that even people who've seen these movies multiple times, they don't get the same thing, which to me makes it a really good movie. And that line kind of goes something like, the more people there are, the lonelier it gets. Because you can be in a room full of people and feel really lonely. And sometimes, if you're observant, you can actually see the person who's going through that. They're kind of drifting through the room. They're not really associating with anybody. But they don't appear to be looking to kind of gather information to kind of feel people out. They just appear to be there. For whatever reason, you may or may not know. But they do not appear to really be socializing or getting something positive. They're just there. As lonely as they would be in an empty house.
Yeah. And that's why I specifically said, for me, this what happened to me. So my situation was more or less based upon my way of thinking and being so hell-bent on everybody should think and feel the way I feel. And that isolated me because everyone didn't think and feel the way I did. And because I wasn't open to their view, it's what made me feel alone. Like I had no one that I could speak to. But it's not that the people around me wasn't open to hearing what I had to say. They just wanted to be heard too. And so for me, it isolated me. Not to say that's the only way we're being isolated. It is times where I do think that you could be in a room full of people and still feel alone because maybe that those are not your people. You know, it's a such thing as, you know, like they say, birds of a feather flock together. You know, you got to get with like-minded people. But I don't think that was necessarily my problem. I think a lot of the people around me were like-minded, but because I had issues and things that I hadn't resolved within, it kept me from really seeing them, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So I think that was just my particular circumstances. I don't want to put that on everyone and say that everyone that's feeling this isolation, this is what it stems from. I wouldn't go that far. I would just share my example of what happened to me and me telling myself that I am open when I really wasn't and the effects of that. And that's pretty much it.
No, I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I really think it's important for us all just to take time to really get to know ourselves, to really understand ourselves. And I think the more that we do that, the more that we'll be able to combat these circumstances and situations that we go through, and the people and things that we come across. Because a person had told me, they said, Stephanie, you take everything back to self. And I think that could be a narcissist way of thinking because everything is not about you. And I say, well, I think that you just got me wrong because while everything is not about you, it's everything that you experience, you can learn something about yourself. So I'm not trying to make everything about me. I'm clear that everything is not about me. Most things are not going to be about me. But every experience that I have, I can learn something about me. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
And so I'm not coming at it from a narcissistic way of everything has to be about me. When I speak of self, I'm not really speaking about Stephanie, this physical being that's here. I'm speaking about something higher than that. You know, I'm speaking about consciousness. I'm speaking about something that was here long before me. I'm speaking about the spirit that lives within me. So for me, when I say you got to take everything back to self, I mean take everything back to that spirit. You know what I mean? Because that spirit will not mislead you. That spirit will not misguide you. And it will not let you manipulate yourself. But as if we think it in a sense of self far as like it's all about me, this worldly self, that would be selfish. I'm not ever leading anyone there. So when I speak of self, I want everyone to understand that I'm speaking something greater than just myself. I'm speaking of us as a whole to a degree. Does that make sense?
Perfectly.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just give my thoughts in terms of a final thought, and that is some general things, and we can talk about it for a minute or two before we wrap it up, because remember, people, everything has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But one of my things is, and this kind of goes along with it, don't procrastinate. But then I have another saying that goes right behind that. Don't equivocate. State what's on your mind. But listen and be flexible. Now, some people would think all those things kind of are in contradiction, and to a degree they are. But the thing is, people are very complex creatures. So many things they do, many behaviors they have are contradictory of each other. They can be very loving and very vengeful. They can be very kind and they can be very aggressive and, give out a lot of negative physical energy towards another person or even a set of circumstances. People are very complex and they're complex simultaneously. It's that internal contradiction of how to manipulate all these thoughts and all these contrasting behaviors to try to be hopefully the best person or the best version of yourself. Because you can't be a version of another person. You have to be the best version of who you are, considering what you are.
Amen. Preach it, brother. Preach it. I agree. Yes, yes, yes. I don't think it's about what the word say. Don't go too far to the left. Don't go too far to the right? It's about the balance, right? And so when you say how complex we are and how sometimes we could be contradictory to ourselves, I think that's normal. I think that it's about finding a balance. So when you said that, you don't want to do too much of this, you don't want to do too much of that, I don't think that that's really necessarily a contradiction as much as it is a reflection of us learning how to just find a balance. It's just about finding a balance, right? No one want to be too hot. No one want to be too cold. We just want to be warm. We want to be balanced, right? And so I think that when we talk about becoming our best selves and being better people, we're just trying to find a balance that we can maintain and sustain. What do you think?
I think exactly that.
Yep. So that's that. We would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think is this theory something you practice every day? Are you truly facing your problems head on? Or could some of us be possibly manipulating ourselves into, we say we are, but we're really not. We're doing, as Keith said, we're doing a bunch of procrastinating, a bunch of blaming and pointing, and we're really afraid to look at ourselves. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that, and what are your takeaways from this conversation, one, and two, what are some of the things you do to ensure that you're actually facing your problems head on? Keith, you want to close us out?
Well, just try to be the best version of you. You can't be a great person without being the best person that you are. Everybody's combined with different traits and different gifts. Many people, unfortunately, want gifts that they don't have, that they see somebody else have, and they wish that they would be that person. But you're not that person. You are who you are. So try to polish and embellish the gifts that you are blessed with, whatever they are, and be the best version of you, and hopefully you'll be content with that.
Hey, I love it, Keith. And with that being said, don't forget to comment, don't forget to like, and don't forget to subscribe, because we don't want you to miss a thing. And we definitely, not only do we want to be heard, but we want to hear your thoughts. We are not just here to be heard. We are here to hear you and to be heard. Thank you. And on that note, you all have a good night.
God bless.